All right. So we should be live on YouTube. Confirm I see my picture. I see myself. All right. What's going on, everyone? Falcone coming to you live from Nashville, Tennessee, and welcome to Falcone Fridays. This will be the third time trying to make this video. The first time the audio was messed up. Second time the audio was messed up. And now hopefully this sounds better now because I really don't feel like doing this for a third time, but heck, why not? So today I'm going to walk you through my process of how I set up my session and I do my stem mastering process. So I'm just going to walk you through step by step how to set up a session. Today we're using Ableton, but you can use any DAW and it will work. But today we're using Ableton. I'm going to show you how I'm going to set up a session, and then I'll show you how I route it through LV1 as I would a analog console, sub that through an analog mixer, and print that back in to Ableton. So without further ado, let's jump right on in. So, okay, here is Ableton Live. This is what happens basically when you open up a blank session. You got a couple MIDI tracks and a couple audio tracks. So I'll show you how to do it with some stems first here, and then kind of apply it to your own sessions and things you're doing. So I'm going to import some stems right now. So I got some stems over here for a project that I just worked on that we're going to use. And I'm going to select all the bass right now. And then if you hold Command and drag them in, you can allow them to be on individual tracks here. So go ahead and do that. And before I continue, let's go up to live and preferences and make sure everything's set right. If you're going to be recording into Ableton, we want this sample rate to be at 96K. I can go into a video alone, just explain to why 96K is a better quality to use, but it's basically you get twice as much information while recording and mixing, but in recording specifically, you're capturing that much, twice as many samples per second is if you were working at 48. So I recommend capturing at 96K 32-bit, and then when you're mixing, go ahead and turn it back down to 48. You save on your CPU processing that way. But for recording, 96K. I'm going to keep it on 48K because I have to, because I'm doing the stream and everything has to be at 48K when I do my video stream. So make sure to make this 96K, and then you also go down to record and warp and make sure your file type is WAV and your bit depth is 32-bit. 32-bit allows you to get print a lot hotter signal, and if you into the box itself. So if you get any over digital 0, you're actually able to gain that back down without any distortion when you use 32-bit. So that's a little pro tip that a lot of the guys use, and I'll show you kind of later in another video of how that actually works. But when you're setting up your session, that's basically what you want to do. So right here, I got these bass stems imported. I'm going to go ahead and just delete the other tracks that I'm not going to be using. So we got these bass tracks, and you can see that we have a few that have the word sub on them. So I'm going to group all the ones that are sub-oriented, and then I'm going to have my bass-oriented tracks here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my subs, and then I'm going to group them by hitting Command-G. I'm going to rename these sub, and then I'm going to right-click. I like this color on the sub, and then assign track color to group, so all my tracks are the same color. Same here on these. I'm going to group the tracks, and then I'm going to make it this color. I'm going to assign it, and I'm going to call this bass. So these are going to be all the instruments, the bass instruments that are more higher in timbre, above 100 hertz, and your sub's going to be anything below 100 hertz, and that is usually just subharmonic information. Same thing, let's go ahead and import our drums here. So I'll go ahead and have my drums, and then same things with my drums. I want to group like instruments. So you want your kicks to be all together. So that's what this heartbeat is, and then here's verse 2 kick. We want to have our snares together. So here's a snare here, and there's a snare, and then you want your tops together, which is like your cymbals and things like that. Hi-hats, anything with a high kind of pitch to it. Where's my cymbals? There's my cymbals. Have those down there. And then anything else, like your percussion loops, your toms, anything like that can be grouped together. So here's my kicks. So I can select all my kicks. I thought I had another kick. 1, 2, kick, heartbeat. I must have dragged. That's where it happened. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and group these kicks together. Rename it to kick. Make it red. Assign it to, I like to use red for those. And then I can group my cymbals together. That's just a fine color. I'm going to call those tops. And then I'm going to make this snare group here. I'm going to right click, make it this blue color. Assign the track. Rename. Snare. And we got all the rest of our stuff. We'll group that. Rename it, call it perk. Right click. I like the orange color. Why not? So there we go. We got all of our drums basically grouped into subgroups corresponding to the instrument. Same thing. Let's go ahead and bring in our effects. Effects are going to be any of our white noise, our cymbal swishes, or transitions, sub drops, anything like that. I'm going to group those and call that effects. All right, and then let's go ahead and make those green, and then assign the group color. There we go. Let's call it guitars next. Bring in your guitars. We'll go ahead and group the guitars. Call those guitars. Make them brown. Go like this. Assign it there. Here's that. All right, and then anything that's like timbre is basically what I'm doing. Right? Is grouping things that are kind of in the same frequency range, right? So this is going to be, I'm going to just call this instruments. In this case, these are going to be, our piano, our pads, or strings and things like that. Those can be in their own group. And then we got our vocals. So I'm going to bring our vocals in. I'm going to group the vocals. And then we're going to make these white and call those vocals. All right. So now when you have that done, we want to make our main groups. So I'm going to go back to our sub and my bass, and I'm going to group those. I'm going to rename that, and I'm going to call that bass. And I'm going to make that purple because I like purple as my bass color. And then I'm going to put my, I'm going to group, back up to. I'm going to take all my drums, my kick, top, snare, and perk. I'm going to group those into their own group. And I'm going to rename that and call it drums. Then I got my effects, my guitars, my instruments, and my vocals, right? So basically, let's make this white and then assign this here. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm taking all my groups that I had, my subgroups of my drums, and bringing it all into one drum bus, basically, or one drum group. So I can apply, stem these out basically and send them to my LV1 to get mixed and summed out the analog summing bus. So each one of these groups is going to get a stereo pair output. So let's go ahead and show you as if, for example, you're a guitar trio and you're going to be recording 3 different players in separate states and things like that. So basically you want to, let's create 3 tracks. And it can be more than 3 tracks if you want, but basically, you can create 3 tracks, call one mic 1, mic 2, and then room mic, right? Or whatever you may have. And you can have all your other instrument or mics in here. And again, if you're doing doubles and things like that, so this would, and this say mic 1, 2, and room was one pass, right? So we want to group those. I'm gonna call that guitar. Guitar. If I can spell. Guitar 1 main, right? And then let's just assign this color here. Different color than that. This fine. And then you can duplicate that and call this guitar 1 double. That way, you have all the 3 mics for your main. You got all your 3 mics for your double, right? Make this a different color if you like. And then say you had a triple, you can say, or an ad lib or a solo track, right? So let's duplicate that and call that guitar 1 solo, right? So you got all 3 mics underneath its own group for the part that you're recording. And then you can take all those 3 and then group those again and call this guitar 1 master, right? So you have individual groups for your 3 microphones per take, and then all those are grouped together into one main bus, right? And then once you have that together, you can go ahead and duplicate that and just call this guitar 2 master, and then rename this guitar 2 main, guitar 2 double, and then guitar 2 solo, right? And then we can make this, say, this color here. And then we can either, however you want to, make these colors, but you can also just go like that and have all those be together like that, and have those colors be together like that. And we can duplicate that again, rename it guitar 3 master, guitar 3 master, main, guitar 3 double, guitar 3 solo. Make it a different color, say it this, go like that, assign track color, boom. So now we have 3 master guitar track groups with subgroups of each take per mic underneath it. So that's kind of how you want to set it up there. And if you had multiple room mics, then you could put group room, and have all the room mics be under the room group that's underneath that take, etc. So just kind of, this is basically the main structure of how I would want to see it, and it's good practice to keep yourself organized that way. And then say in this process I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I can put all these then in their own group and call this acoustics, right? So now I have my acoustic bus, main bus, which has the 3 guitars underneath it that have their own basically groups underneath those. So super geeky stuff, but that's basically how I like to do that. So let's hop over to LV1 real quick, and I'll show you kind of what I have going on over here. I did this in the last take, but nonetheless, I'll do it again for you. So this is LV1. You got, basically, I treat LV1 as it was an analog console, basically. So you have your inputs at the top, your outputs at the bottom, your faders, and then you have these racks that you can put plugins and stuff on, which I'll walk you through here in just a second. But first, we want to get the tracks out of Ableton into this mixer. So you'll see here at the top, this is your input, and you have a bunch of different options to select what your input is, right? So desktop N3 EKBDP is the computer name for my Mac Mini, and I'm going to select 1 and 2 as the input to this channel, 1 and 2. They can either be stereo or mono, but in this case, we're using stereo tracks, right? So if I go back to Ableton real quick, then I want to basically get those out from Ableton to the LV1. So I can click on where it says master, because right now everything's going to the master bus here. I want this to go out to external out. And since I have my audio interface here select to Wave Sound Grid, I get 32 channels in and out of Wave Sound Grid. So that's why my inputs sound grid and my outputs sound grid. So that corresponds to these external outputs. So basically, when I hit 1 and 2 here, and I press play, you'll see on LV1, we got level on 1 and 2. Okay? You'll see I got level here on LV1. Right? So if I hop back over here, I'm just going to go down the line then. So I want my bass to be 3 and 4, and that bass consists of both sub and bass underneath the main bass group. I'm going to move the effects down here because that's usually like, how I like to do that. Put my effects down here. So we're going to make the guitars bus or output 5 and 6, or acoustics 7 and 8. My instruments, which are all the other stuff, pads, pianos, orchestra, 9 and 10. Vocals are going to go out 11 and 12. And my effects are going to go out 13 and 14. And then all the Ableton effects that you're going to be using, reverb, delay, and things like that, we want that to go out external output 15 and 16. So I'm using the first 16 channels of Ableton's outputs to go to LV1. So if I press play here and I hop over to LV1, you're going to see we have everything playing there. If I go to a section of the song that there's some bass information, like over here, you'll see we have all the corresponding faders and lights lighting up on the faders over here in LV1. All right, cool. So now that we have that, we need to get those out basically to the summing bus. So if I go over here to LV1, I can show you basically the I/O. So this is the control screen, but we have a DLS which has a Wave Sound Grid server and an I/O built into it, similar to UAD where they have the DSP processing in the Apollo themselves or the external processing card to be able to process all the plugins. This is Wave's version of that, and it has its own box as a server in it, and it has an I/O. And the I/O happen to be 2 DigiLink connectors, so I'm able to hook my 192 Avid interfaces directly to it. So that's right what I have here. I have a 192 and 96 I/O on the first port, and on port 2, I have another 192. On the first 192, we're using the 16 analog outputs it has, and we're using the SpeedIF input, and I'll show you why that's important here in a second. 96 I/O, I'm using the first 8 analog inputs. That's where my microphone's going on. And the second 192, I'm using the SpeedIF output, and also have 16 inputs that I use to connect my synthesizers and other outboard gear. So currently 16 input, maybe 24, 32 outputs, depending how I configure it all. Everything is being clocked off the word clock input to the DLS, which is hooked to a Big Ben clock. So all the interfaces here are taking word clock in from the Big Ben master clock to give it a stable clock all the way around, and that is what we're using as our clocking source. Cool thing about this system is that all you need is an Ethernet cord. All this is hooked up through Ethernet. So you can see here, this is the DLS with all the I/O, which is hooked up Ethernet to my machine. So all those I/O are going directly via Ethernet. And then I have my computer here and my streaming PC that are also hooked to the network via Ethernet. So I'm able to send 32 channels or more to and from any device that's on this network via Ethernet. So I can be sitting there with my laptop and have full access to an HD rig via Ethernet. Mind blown. So we'll go in more depth on other videos on this setup, how you can get in this setup, because networked audio is the future, and it is what people have been using and will be using at the highest level to do all their stuff. So that's just the basic run through of LV1 and how the I/O are set up. So if I go back here, I want to now get those out to the summing bus, right? So you can see I have outputs. So this is our inputs at the top, outputs at the bottom here. So I want to send those out to DLS 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So then I need to get that back into the computer, right? So that's where I'm going to utilize that speedif input on 192's 1 there. I'm going to select that as the input, and that's going to be the return of the summing bus. So basically, rundown again, it goes out of the 192 16 channels into an analog passive 16 channel summing bus. We lose level by doing that because it's a passive summing bus. No active components, so the gain level is dropped. So we need to regain that. So after the summing bus, that goes directly into a BAE 1073 mic pre, where I get all the coloration from the transformers and electronics that is within it. Use that to regain it. Also runs through a Nipro EQ3D for that magical 40K airband. That is just set in and forget it. I never touch it. I just run it through it. I have a setting I like, and that's basically the chain, right? So it goes out of the EQ3D into a Rosetta, Apogee Rosetta 200 analog. Then it has a soft limit on it, so I can drive level from the analog gear hotter into that analog to digital converter. And since it has a soft limit, it limits nothing from going over digital 0. So I can push the level hotter into it before it gets converted to digital, allowing me to get a hotter level. But my level going to tape is actually not that hot because of the limiter. So my perceived volume is hotter. So into the Rosetta 200 analog, out of it digital, goes into the 192 speedif. That's how it ends up here in LV1. So if I press play on Ableton, you'll be able to see it, and you should be able to hear it too. Make sure I can hear it here. If I go over to this, and that's going there. Should be hearing that. Here's the mix 1. There. Over here it's muted. Beautiful. So I hear it, sounds great. So I can just like, not the ones I want to mute. I want to mute these. So if I mute the drums, it's vocal. Cool. So that's that. So if I go back here, yeah. So then I basically set this up as a mixer, right? So I use it's NLS plugin. So I'll use this, and this basically becomes a mixer. So I use either Spike, Mic, or Nevo. Spike's an SSL. Mic is in the EMS Abbey Road Pink Floyd console. My favorite. Nevo is a emulation of a Neve. Spike has some really good open mid-range, great on acoustic instruments. Mic just has body low end, low mid information for days. Let me go back here real quick and not hear this. Okay, good. And then Neve is a blend of both worlds. It has really good low end, but more of a smooth, not as an aggressive low end as this mic plugin. So I like to use the mic plugin. I like to turn the drive up to 5, and this goes into gain structure and why I'm choosing to get level here instead of turning up a fader like I would over here just to get more level. I'm actually driving gain, meaning driving circuitry to get power and energy and perceived volume via analog gain versus just turning up the level of something. And we can go into a video in depth on how and why and where you would use that. But for now, I'm just saying that's what I do. So then I can alt and click and I can drag that across all my channels. So now I got basically 8 stereo groups running through this emulation here. Then on my drums, I usually like to use a API 2500. Set it like so. And something like around this ish area. It's kind of like how I like to start. Is either going to be if I want a more of a punchier sound, I'm going to use 10 milliseconds. If I want more of a less perceived compression, I'm going to go 30 milliseconds. But again, that depends on the key of your song and the tempo and all that good stuff and your gain structure. So, but anywhere from around here to here on the threshold knob is how I like to set it and get my gain reduction to be around -1, -2 ish, depending on how loud and how punchy the song is. Then I like to put on the F6, which is a multi-band dynamics EQ, basically a dynamic EQ that has stereo mid-side capability. Again, we will go into depth a lot of how to use this plugin and how to tune it everything with the golden ratio and the key of your song and the tempo to get all your attack and release times to be moving together musically, so the whole thing flows together and it feels like something versus just this stereo mix. Very cool techniques that I'll describe and explain to you when we do an in-depth tutorial. But basically, that's what I like to do there. And I usually just throw that F6 on everything again because this is my final, basically, control before I go to the summing button. It's all about gain structure. And if I hop back over to Ableton, you know, when I do these master groups, I like these to all be at 0, right? So then if I need a little less gain, I could just select all of these at one time, and then I can just turn them down 3, 4, 5, 6 dB or whatever I need to do because it depends on how I want to drive it. What sound do I want to get, right? Because by me driving level less out of Ableton and then using LV1 over here, you know, to use this drive or this fader itself instead of level from Ableton, that's a different sound. And it's also a different sound if I choose to drive the level from these faders themselves, because this is the fader that's controlling, that goes to the output of the converters, right? Because it goes input, plug-in, output, fader. So fader is the last thing you get. So I can use, if I go over to channel 17 here, and then I go to channel and I go to link, I can go ahead and link these to basically a VCA fader, which will allow me to turn the volume up and down, all of those, basically the level on all these tracks at the same time. So I'll go ahead and link those all together, right? So then if I go over here to my link page and I pull this fader down here, 6 dB, and I go back to this, you'll see these ghost faders that are now down because that is the VCA level. That's the link level here, right? So if I mute this, go back, they're all muted, right? If I go back here, if I mute this, they're not anymore. And see, it's all level dependent because then I can turn this back up. But then if I go over to link again and turn it down more, it's still going to just turn it down in comparison to what I turn this fader up. See? So that's a little trick because then if I say, oh, I want to push my level from Ableton a little hotter, right? I can say, I want to push this a little hotter. I want to go over to Ableton and I want to lower this down a little bit, so not drive the output of the converters so much. I can. Again, this is gain structure and all these things, so it's a whole nother video to go into explaining all this. But that's basically my process and all of this. I've been talking for a long time, but anyway, I hope that was useful. This is going to get better every time, so hopefully this was a good video and explains my process and what I actually want from you to send me so I can mix your track or do the stem mastering process. Thanks a lot for tuning in. My name's Falcone. You can check me out on my website, mixedbyfalcone.com. And we will see you next week. Same bat place, same bat channel, same bat time, if you will. I'm going to go ahead and click on over to my other screen here. And hopefully, see ya.